with the military operation organized by the Ukrainian army within the borders of Russia. The general appointed by Russian leader Vladimir Putin in Belgorod was captured. Pro-Ukrainian Russian Liberation Army soldiers cleared 3 towns in Belgorod from the occupation forces and captured the Russian general and 22 Russian soldiers. The war between Russia and Ukraine, which has been going on in Ukrainian territory for a long time, is currently going on within the borders of Russia. The Ukrainian army, which entered the territory of Belgorod on Russia's border with Ukraine, organized 3 different operations and pushed back the Russian troops there. The Pro-Ukrainian Russian Liberation Army soldiers, who organized a large-scale military operation within the borders of Russia with a gigantic strategic plan, disgraced Vladimir Putin to the whole world. Pro-Ukrainian soldiers not only captured a Russian territory for the first time with the operation they organized, but also neutralized and captured the Russian general assigned in this region. Pro-Ukrainian soldiers, who reapplied the strategy they had previously implemented in the Zaporizhia region, infiltrated into Russia by wearing Russian military uniforms. The success of the pro-Ukrainian soldiers, who captured 3 Russian regions with the military operations they organized here and captured a large Russian headquarters in the Kazanka region and captured the Russian general serving here, made a big noise on the world agenda. Russian liberation fighters who have been fighting against Russian forces in Ukrainian territory for a long time are waging a great struggle to end the Russian occupation and Putin's regime. Founded from soldiers who fled the Soviet's army in the Second World War, this union has been continuing its activities for many years. These pro-Ukrainian soldiers entered Russian territory with the operation launched in recent days and carried out 3 different operations in the city of Belgorod. Pro-Ukrainian soldiers who launched an offensive in the areas where the Russian army was concentrated first entered the Gravarin region of Belgorod. After hours of clashes, it was announced that the area was completely cleared of Russian soldiers and under the control of the Russian Liberation Army. At the same time, the governor of Belgorod, Vyacheslav Gladkov, made a statement saying that the Ukrainian army troops had captured the Gravarin settlement within the borders of Russia and that all Russian troops there had withdrawn. Sputnik news agency, on the other hand, reported that pro-Ukrainian troops continued their airstrikes against the town of Glovo and 2 Russian soldiers were killed. Meanwhile, the Russian Liberation Army soldiers wasted no time and launched a military operation in the Kosenko region known as the Coordination Center of Russian Troops in Belgorod. Pro-Ukrainian soldiers who entered the borders of Kazanka took action to seize a large Russian headquarters there. The pro-Ukrainian soldiers who completely surrounded the headquarters managed to successfully capture the Russian headquarters in Kosenko region after hours of clashes. While most of the Russian soldiers inside the headquarters managed to escape, it was stated that many Russian soldiers were neutralized. However, hours later, a statement came from the commander of the Russian Liberation Army that drove Vladimir Putin crazy. It was announced by the commander of the pro-Ukrainian troops that the Russian general who served as the Russian army commander in Belgorod was serving in this headquarters and that the Russian general was arrested and taken prisoner after the headquarters was captured. According to the statements made on the Telegram channels of the Russian Liberation Army, 22 Russian soldiers and 1 senior Russian general in the headquarters have been captured. It is said that after the pro-Ukrainian soldiers captured the Russian general, the general was transferred to Ukrainian territory and continues to be held captive in a Ukrainian headquarters there. With the news that the Russian general was taken prisoner, there was a major crisis in the Kremlin palace. According to information obtained from sources close to the Kremlin, Russian leader Vladimir Putin summoned General Valery Gerasimov, the commander of the Russian army, and Sergei Naryshkin, the head of the Russian intelligence service. Immediately after this incident, according to the information obtained, the Russian leader blamed Sergei Naryshkin for the fact that the soldiers of the Russian Liberation Army so easily entered the Russian borders and organized such an operation. Putin, who has recently been very tense due to the successive operations organized by the Ukrainian army, continues to blame those around him for these failures. The city of Belgorod on Russia's border with Ukraine is of great importance for Vladimir Putin and Russian military. Most of the ammunition and weapons sent to Russian troops in Ukrainian territory are sent to Ukrainian territory via Belgorod. The Ukrainian army, which wants to break the power of the Russian army on Ukrainian territory, has been organizing operations to prevent these military shipments of the Russian army for a long time. The Russian Liberation Army, which operates in Russia but is opposed to Vladimir Putin and the Russian army and has been cooperating with the Ukrainian army for a long time, has organized a similar operation within Russian borders by varying Russian military uniforms. The Russian Liberation Army soldiers who managed to infiltrate the Russian headquarters in the Zaporizhia region with the same strategy before managed to capture the Russian corridors with a great strategy. The pro-Ukrainian Russian soldiers who managed to capture 72 Russian soldiers in the headquarters and neutralized 18 Russian soldiers, dropped like a bomb on the world agenda. The Zaporizhia region, which was occupied by the Russian army in the first month of the war, was a very important region for Putin because it was home to Europe's largest nuclear power plant. For this reason, Vladimir Putin organized a referendum with an illegal annexation decision shortly after occupying this region. Putin's main goal was to transfer the entire management of the nuclear facility to Russia. Putin dismissed all Ukrainian engineers from the plant and replaced them with Russian engineers. The first blow to Putin, who thought that he had completely dominated the Zaporizhia region, came from the soldiers of the Russian Liberation Army. Thanks to the operation organized by this pro-Ukrainian soldiers, the Russian headquarters was captured. Thus, the first blow was struck to Vladimir Putin when Russian leader Vladimir Putin realized that he could not continue his occupation of Ukrainian territory only with the Russian army. He started to ask for support from his allies. Putin, who first enlisted the support of the Wagner mercenary company Yevgeny Prigozhin, bought a large number of mercenaries and sent them to fight on Ukrainian soil. Not only that, Putin has also sent prisoners from Russian prisons to Ukraine through the Wagner company in exchange for their freedom and has been making Russian prisoners fight in Ukraine. Another ally of Vladimir Putin was Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov. Ramzan Kadyrov, who declared that he would support Russia in the first months of the war, was providing military support to the Russian army. However, when Putin realized that he was losing the war in Ukraine, he started to ask for more support from Ramzan Kadyrov. Thus, tens of thousands of Chechen soldiers were sent to fight in Ukraine on Ramzan Kadyrov orders. However, the vast majority of the Chechen soldiers sent did not want to fight for Vladimir Putin. As a result, there was great unrest within the Russian troops on the territory of Ukraine. These disturbances, which started with the disagreements between Wagner soldiers and Chechen soldiers, led to many revolts within the army. Chechen commanders who were uncomfortable with the racist approach of Wagner soldiers treating Chechen soldiers as second-class people had many arguments with Wagner commanders. As it is known, Chechen soldiers and Wagner soldiers are stationed in the same headquarters. According to the claims of Chechen soldiers, the basic necessities such as ammunition, rations, and medicines sent by the Russian government to these headquarters were not given to Chechen soldiers. Chechen soldiers who stated that even most of the most important supplies were given to Wagner soldiers stated that they are trying to survive with one meal a day. Chechen soldiers who reacted to the situation decided to lay down their arms many times and protested against Vladimir Putin. However, due to the economic difficulties Russia is currently experiencing, not enough supplies can be sent to Russian troops in Ukrainian territory. There are a lot of updates from the northeast. The day started with several massive explosions in Luhansk, which is a city located around 100 kilometers behind the front line. This was actually the second consecutive day of precision strikes on targets inside the city, which magnified panic and speculations about the usage of Storm Shadow missiles because previously Ukrainians could not reach so deep in the rear. The first and second targets of the Ukrainian strike became machine-building factories. These factories were used as some of the most important and reliable repair facilities for the Russian tanks, armored fighting vehicles, and other equipment. Russian sources reported that Ukrainians used at least 2 rockets and successfully hit the Polypek factory and the Milan factory. The third target became the former building of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Such buildings are usually used as high-level military headquarters for the commanders of brigades and divisions. The fourth and fifth targets became facilities belonging to food and chemical processing plants. Such factories usually have huge warehouses and storage facilities, which were likely used for storing ammunition and equipment. At first, Russian sources reported that Ukrainians used ballistic missiles. Hit him too. However, today, as more information became available, this theory was dispelled. Today, Russians found remnants of a British Storm Shadow missile and an American AGM-160B rocket. On top of that, Russians noted that Ukrainians scrambled 1 Su-24 and 1 MiG-29, which gave an insight into the Ukrainian tactic. Ukrainians first launched AGM-160 missiles as decoys for the Russian air defense. And while the Russian air defense was focused on the decoy, the Storm Shadow missiles had a clear sky. And all of that happened under the cover of MiG-29. Russian Air Force also conducted a missile strike today. Ukrainian General Staff reported that they recorded a total of 21 launches of various drones. Ukrainian air defense managed to shoot down 17, while 4 managed to hit objects in various parts of Ukraine. The biggest explosion happened in Vinnytsky. Judging by the explosion, it is clear that Russians managed to blow up an ammunition depot on a Ukrainian military base located around 1 kilometer away from the city. Russian sources reported that this base has huge storage of aircraft ammunition. Another successful strike happened in Ternopil. The target became a railway machinery and repair plant, which Ukrainians are possibly using for repairing their equipment. But the biggest news by far comes from the northern flank. Today, Russians lost here 4 aircraft within minutes. Russian officials reported that the incidents happened due to an engine malfunction. And official sources challenged the official narrative and stated that even though the fire indeed broke out near the engine, it looked like an explosion from a missile. The photos of the remnants dispelled all doubts as the damage is characteristic of a missile explosion. There are 4 main versions of what happened. Firstly, since the incident happened more than 50 kilometers from the main Ukrainian positions, some Ukrainian and Russian sources speculated that the Russian air defense malfunctioned and destroyed the whole unit, which is quite unlikely. Secondly, some of them also speculated that Ukrainian intelligence found out about the planned Russian mission near the northern border and decided to ambush the aerial unit. Sabotage activities in the Bryansk region are already a common occurrence, so it looks like it is not difficult to cross the border and assume the necessary positions. However, even though the damage on the remnants indicates that it was a missile, the trajectory was horizontal, which is not characteristic of the use of man-portable systems. Thirdly, it was speculated that Ukrainians decided to ambush the aerial unit by bringing one of the Patriot systems into the region. However, even though this version explains the horizontal trajectory, it is still highly unlikely that Ukrainians would risk such equipment for such a risky venture. Lastly, the most credible version suggests that Ukrainians ambushed Russian aviation with their own aviation. Ukrainians reportedly used fighter jets from the airfield in Poltava that were equipped with AIM-120 advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles, which have a range of up to 70 kilometers. So Ukrainian jets would not even need to get close to the border. In this case, all puzzles fit together, and some Russian military-affiliated bloggers reported that they are already trying to find the clerks that instructed the pilots to operate at an unsafe altitude. Given that Ukrainians are closely monitoring Russian airfields, it would not be hard to make such a trap, especially knowing the general patterns in which Russians like to approach the targets and also knowing the regulations for altitude.